So if you didn't know, just over a week ago I did a video on what Assassin's Creed Mirage did right and what was good about the game. I mentioned I would also do the opposing side, which is this video on what Mirage does wrong. So we've praised the game and now it's time to rinse it. I do feel like Mirage isn't a perfect game, and that's why this type of video style is good, as some parts they nailed and it makes the game feel way better in those aspects compared to other entries, more so the recent ones. But there's also a good amount of parts that take it down a bit. One of the biggest focuses, and in my opinion my favourite part, is the stealth. However, with them putting a big spotlight on this side of gameplay, there's one big aspect that gets way less attention, and that's of course the combat. Now, I'm aware this game was meant to go back to roots and feel more like an assassin game, and it does for the most part because of them really promoting stealth, and funny enough, in those moments you do feel like an assassin. But even in the old games, the combat and stealth were balanced and it was great to use both. I never pushed myself to use one because I didn't want to do the other. It felt so satisfying and smooth, way more varied and definitely way less difficult. From the way they advertised this game, I expected them to do well in a few areas to get that nostalgia, because it's very different from the big RPG style games we've gotten. However, it means that not everything was going to be given to you. It's only those select areas like stealth and the more condensed city environment that hold your attention for a while. If you play the game for a good amount of hours, you're still only enjoying those parts. As soon as you move away from the fun stealth gameplay and move into open combat, it is dry. For almost every single fight, you just have to wait for a window to parry an attack when an enemy goes gold, and you can literally press F to kill. And then there's the opposite. Yes, there's just two enemy types, where it's a heavier enemy that you can't parry, instead you dodge when they glow red, and you can only spam light or heavy attack from behind as they're armoured on the front, which I don't know if it's just me, but I can never make those fights seem smooth and fun to play. You just wait until you dodge and then move behind them in a very quick time frame, so it just ends up being messy and awkward. And some may just think, oh well, just only do stealth combat then. I mean, after all, it's meant to be a stealth game, which it is, but you physically can't avoid it, and there's a good amount of melee combat in this game, a lot more than I expected. So with them not focusing on this side at all, but it still being a core aspect of the game, it becomes so repetitive so easily. It's just not balanced, with no combos, special attacks, less clunky animations, and more varied assassinations, like double assassination for example. But then again, I know I keep coming back to it, but the focus is stealth, and the game doesn't want you to perform melee combat even though there's a lot of it. So although the stealth is great, if they don't want you to combat, then that's the only gameplay you have to try and do for 15 hours, which won't change over time, like harder enemy types for example. Now let's move away from the combat and towards the next aspect that Mirage does wrong, and that's the story. In my other video I stated that the opening of the story was great, and I still stand by that, but that's the only part. Just a bit of time after becoming an assassin, the story does go downhill, like a lot. Now I knew the story was going to be short because, well, it's a smaller game, and I was okay with that because I was just glad we could go back to roots for a bit, and with it being short, I assumed that that would mean it wouldn't drag out or become boring in any way. Safe to say I was proven wrong, as the majority of the story involves you going to the same location every time to then be ordered an objective. That's usually always the opposite side of the map, and this won't be the main one. There's smaller side objectives, usually around 3, before you can complete the main quest, which would usually be an assassination of a target. These smaller objectives around the main one, they're always finding a clue, like finding a piece of information written down like a letter or maybe a key, or a cutscene where you just speak to someone for a minute and that's it. Just travelling back and forth to repeat this same process. And this is the main story, not a side quest, in-world event or a contract. They almost just feel like GTA heist setups, and before you can start the main heist. For most of the story it just seems like small objectives thrown at you, just like side quests, but in fact it's the main storyline. And then the side quests themselves are, funny enough, very similar, which just proves it. I mentioned contracts earlier, and that's what the side content is. Almost the same as the main objective. You have to find an item and usually steal it, or it will be a tailing mission. As I mentioned in the opposing video, the assassination black box missions are great and really fun to plan out your route, but that's the final mission after completing all those same objectives ordered to you. Now travelling across the map constantly to do this usually wouldn't be fun, and I feel like the reason why they did it this way is because you can find fun in parkouring over the city to these missions, rather than riding on your horse through the same grasslands like that other game. So this means you do a lot of parkour through this whole city environment, because the city makes up 80% of the map, and again, last time I mentioned that they nailed the world building, but the actual parkour mechanics, which you now do an awful lot of, aren't perfect. Before they put out gameplay of Mirage, I really thought because we were going back to an old style, the two main things that stuck out were stealth and parkour, because those are the two main parts of an assassin. But once we saw gameplay, I was a bit skeptical as it just seemed the same. I wish they used the same parkour mechanics as Unity, it would have made it so much better, but at this point it just seems like an impossibility. The parkour really hasn't changed at all from the RPG games, even though this game was meant to be the assassin game, and movement is key with this much freedom in doing it more than ever before. So the environment for parkour is top class, but the mechanics still follow that stiffness and awkwardness, like the RPG parkour system, with minimal fluidity and smooth animations. When you grab onto a ledge or lunge across, you always see the moment it switches to an animation, which wasn't the case in Unity. I always saw myself becoming stuck when trying to perform a smooth run and build up momentum, which just always strips away the immersion. It's a shame, as like I said, this dense city is there for parkour, and the parkour lets it down. Lastly, I like to talk about the extra content after completion. As soon as you finish the story, yes, you can complete the contracts and collect all the artifacts, but even after that, there's nothing to do afterwards. I know it's a short game, but a new game plus would have been nice, especially as they didn't add one in Valhalla, which was a giant game anyway, so it wasn't the biggest deal. But with this story being so short, you just have to quit after completion. It really seems like they made this game so small, with not the most varied content, just so they could try and make old fans happy, which didn't work overall. And now it seems like it's all heads down for the Codename Red next year, which is again a big RPG. If you don't know what New Game Plus is, it means you can use all the items, outfits and tools gained in another playthrough from the start, rather than having to build them up again, and it makes for a very different experience when you have everything there early on. I'm sure it wouldn't have hurt the game and will definitely make the player count not decrease so much after they finish the story. I've also heard that they don't plan on bringing any extra DLCs in the future, which may change, but who knows. Then again, it does seem like this game is a DLC in itself anyway, from Valhalla. You also can't replay any of the missions at all without restarting or going back to a save file. This also includes side content like contracts. As I mentioned, this is one of the aspects that could change over time. I mean, it's looking like late next year until we get Codename Red, but I can guarantee that'll be delayed. And I think that's where I'll end this video. Let me know your thoughts on Assassin's Creed Mirage in the comments, and if you agree with what I've said, I'd like to hear what other people think, as I know people will like this game more than others. If you did enjoy or found this video helpful, then let me know by tapping that like button down below. And if you like story video games, and that's what this channel is all about, I have playlists on all the games I've reviewed in the description down below. And lastly, we now have memberships on the channel, so if you'd like to support me by becoming a member, then you can click the join button, or if that isn't there, then there'll be a link in the description. There's 2 levels with a set of perks for each one, and you of course gain access to a set of emojis and a badge for each month. Thank you for supporting the channel and watching until the very end. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.